Hey there, what's going on? Welcome to 360 Self-Love. I am your host, Vilmalis, and I am so grateful to have you here today. In episode 1, I talked about phase 1 of my self-love journey. I share how I leaned into fitness, nutrition, and structured discipline, which all led to helping me feel safe, not just within my life, but in my body. This all came from a place of genuinely respecting my body and my health. It was my first act of self-love. In this episode, I'm going to be sharing with you about phase 2 of my self-love journey. My goal is to help you understand whether the type of control and or discipline that is currently driving your choices is serving you or holding you back. Here's what I've learned. Self-love is not a thing that we arrive at once and are done. It's a journey. It's something that we're always working at and learning from. And within every journey, there are phases. And my first phase was all about basic self-leadership skills that taught me what self-care and self-respect are all about. It was about learning to take care of my physical body and well-being. Now, anytime we outgrow one version of ourselves, we are essentially stepping into a new phase. And with every new phase, there's a new level of awareness that occurs. For me, the awareness that emerged in phase 2 of my self-love journey was less about my physical well-being and more about my internal well-being. I often say fitness saved me. That and my faith. Back then, I relied on deepening my relationship with a higher power and movement to regulate and feel safe in my body. I'm beyond grateful to have built a strong foundation in my relationship with myself through this experience. Now, because of the level of safety that fitness, discipline, and structure offer me during that time of my life, that unstable and scary time of my life, I became a bit obsessed with it all. What once was the right amount of discipline eventually became rigid and excessive, and not in the necessary kind of way. Like I shared in episode 1, the firm parental type of discipline served me in the first few years post my panic attack. It actually resembled a loving and caring parent. But years later, it was less about balance and it shifted into criticism and control. Because that strict container served me in my early 20s, I kept correlating control to safety. Without me realizing it, there was a constant conversation running in the background all along. I noticed it for the first time at around age 35. The language was much like should, can't, have to. So quote unquote, I have to work more, I can't rest. Rest is for lazy people, or I should eat cleaner, or shouldn't take a day off. I would force myself to do things regardless of how I felt. I worked nonstop, even past burnout, and only felt like I had a successful workout if I was shaking, burning, or sweating. I undernourished my body for the level of movement that I was doing at that time. I was running on adrenaline and confusing it with energy. I was so dysregulated, but I thought that was normal and what you had to do to be successful, or what I had to do to be a better version of myself, quote unquote. And here's the thing. At 23, I didn't feel safe in my body, so I disconnected from it. I disconnected from my intuition. I pushed past discomfort because initially that helped my growth. But eventually, that discomfort and hard discipline became about punishment and perfectionism. And because I had disconnected from my body, I didn't know how to tell when I had taken things too far. I now understand that rigid discipline is tied to control. Control is tied to perfectionism, and perfectionism is tied to not feeling safe. Safe to relax, safe to let go, safe to feel, safe to be in our bodies, safe to be our true selves. And this is where the shift really began for me, because I had to start asking myself not just what I was doing, but why I was doing it and how it was actually making me feel. For years, I kept punishing myself for not having been the perfect daughter or the perfect version of me that I was quote unquote supposed to be. I kept seeing myself as that 23-year-old who had screwed up her life and health. I kept seeing myself through the eyes of a disappointed parent. Like I said earlier, I realized all of this when I became aware of my inner conversation. I began to notice a critical voice. It was a projection of what I thought my mom expected of me. And if I'm being completely frank, my mom did have very high expectations of me. Naturally, she wanted me to be the best I could be and live to my potential just like any parent would. And I wanted nothing more than to make her proud. At the time, I stepped into phase two of my self love journey. She was already gone, so while I knew she'd be proud of the woman I had become at that point of my life, she was no longer around to see, so I kept needing to prove to myself. I grieved her and the possibility of her ever seeing who I'd become. So I would go into phases of feeling like no matter what I've accomplished, it was just not enough. I hit a goal and immediately moved the bar higher. With fitness, it looked like, oh wow, I got the six pack, cool, what's next? Maybe I want those lines in my legs. Okay, cool, I got the lines, then what's next? I was always chasing and never arriving, never at peace. I barely allow myself to feel proud, present, or content. If this sounds familiar, you are not alone. And the truth is, this way of living can follow you into every part of your life, your career, your relationships, your creativity, and there's nothing wrong with wanting more. But if your desire for more is rooted in not feeling like you're enough, it will never feel fulfilling. I know what it feels like to bully oneself and to have to learn how to develop unshakable self love despite what different parts of me are saying. Phase two for me was the beginning of emotional work, of developing a more compassionate and kinder inner conversation. It is where I became aware of how I spoke to myself. This phase was mainly about awareness and beginning to practice self compassion and self kindness by acknowledging my wins more often, by practicing gratitude and speaking differently to myself, more lovingly, more gentle. This was a different kind of self respect that was equally necessary. Because discipline itself is not the problem, structure itself is not the problem, even control in itself is not the problem. It's the energy behind it, the intention driving it, and the part of you that's at the steering wheel. What I had to learn in this phase was how to stop leading myself through pressure and start leading myself through compassion. And that didn't mean I stopped showing up. It meant I started showing up differently. I still believe there are seasons where we need more structure and more discipline and more self-leadership, and there are seasons where we need to soften, slow down, and listen more deeply. These two can also coexist. The key is in not swinging to extremes for the sake of it, but about meeting ourselves in a way that actually supports our nervous system, current state, and growth. Because you can't force your way to change if you don't feel safe. But you also can't avoid growth in the name of softness. So yes, someone who lacks structure may need stronger boundaries or non-negotiables, but it has to be done in a way that feels manageable so their body can actually learn from it. And someone who is overly rigid may need to learn how to let go, how to rest, how to trust. But again, in a way that feels safe enough for their system to receive it. That's where the real balance is, in learning how to work with your body, not against it. Now, this is really important for you to remember. Needing more structure and discipline to thrive in certain areas of our lives or during certain phases of our journey should not be an excuse to stay in the cycle of perfectionism or to allow a cruel inner conversation. At age 23, discipline and structure helped me and led to safety. And yes, I pushed myself to do uncomfortable things using a strict yet loving parent or coach-like voice. But like I said over and over, there was a difference with the level at which I needed this at that time of my life. Whereas at age 35, it became about something completely different. It was no longer about safety, but it was about familiarity, control, perfectionism, pressure, and there is a difference. What once created safety eventually became something I was hiding behind. The parent voice was no longer a loving, caring parent wanting to set me straight, but it was a tough and cruel voice that constantly shamed me. Regardless of the degree of structure and discipline you have to apply, the question I invite you to keep coming back to is this: is this serving me or holding me back? What once worked may not always propel you. Progressing to the next level will require a different approach. So going back to our initial question, how do you actually know if the type of discipline and or control that is currently driving your choices is serving you or holding you back? You begin by becoming curious, aware of the voice in the background, of its energy, aware of what's driving you, without judgment, just simply allowing yourself to notice it. And here's the truth: awareness is only the beginning. Awareness alone didn't mean I fully changed. It didn't mean I fully let go. It didn't mean I trusted myself yet. Because even though I was aware, even though I started speaking to myself differently, there were still patterns I couldn't fully shift out of. There were still moments where I still felt stuck in the same cycle, still moments where I knew better and couldn't fully do differently. And that's exactly what led me into my next phase. The phase where I realized that mindset alone wasn't enough, that awareness was only the beginning of transformation, that speaking kindly to myself, while powerful, still had its limits. In the next episode, I'm going to share what changed everything for me, what actually allowed me to start feeling safe in a completely different way, and why the work I do today goes far beyond discipline and even beyond mindset, because phase 3 is where things really started to shift. I hope you found this episode insightful. I am Vilma-Lise Bosque, and I am wishing you a peaceful, creative, and joyful day. Until next time.